what does the process look like where all of a sudden there's a breakdown, and how does insulin relate to that?
Yeah, so it takes decades. And that's almost the beautiful part about it. Like all of these chronic conditions, insulin resistance that, is related to insulin resistance, like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, they take decades to develop. That's why they're chronic. So it's kind of these slow insults over and over that happen that eventually lead to this breakdown in communication to the level that things are no longer functioning. And it's also multifactorial. So I always tell people, if you ever hear like a simplistic answer, like this thing causes insulin resistance, or like this is the one thing you need to do, it's overly simplistic because the system is complicated, just like a transportation system is complicated. So there are many factors that can lead to this development over time. And essentially what tends to happen first is that it's kind of like the boy who cries wolf. First, you tend to get higher insulin levels, but still maintain insulin sensitivity, meaning that your body responds to the communication that insulin is trying to tell you, but it requires like twice the amount of insulin to have that same signal actually resonate with the cells. And so it's kind of like at first, insulin is like, you're not doing the thing that you said you should do. And so I'm going to do it twice as much. I'm going to pump out twice the amount of insulin in order to reach that signal. And then the body does it. And then eventually, after those insulin levels have been rising and rising, and if we don't change anything, then what we see is those cells just kind of become numb to that insulin signal. So eventually it stops responding at all. So now we have high levels of insulin, but really no response to what insulin is trying to get the body to do. So that's why tracking those insulin levels, especially fasted insulin levels, can tell us a lot as, we start to see that fasted level increase, but then eventually, it stops responding. And that's when we say we're no longer insulin sensitive. And what can cause that is a lot of factors, as we mentioned. So a lot of it has to do with our diet, our lifestyle. So over consuming in general. So if we overeat, then we tend to accumulate fat, especially in our organs, that visceral fat. And that tends to muddy that signal, that insulin sensitivity. Same with sedentary behaviors, partially because it can lead to that development of visceral fat as well. But also we know that skeletal muscle or having kind of a robust, lean body mass helps protect us against some of these effects. So if we're sedentary, if we're not doing any sort of resistance training, then we no longer have that kind of safeguard to keep our insulin sensitivity. And then we know things like environmental toxins, so things like smoking, air pollution, those kind of things can also play a role. Things like poor sleep, lots of stress levels. So if we're under chronic stress, then we have that constant hum of cortisol, which is constantly raising our glucose levels, which is constantly stimulating some insulin. So a lot of these lifestyle factors that are kind of the pillars of what we know to be important, diet, movement, stress management, prioritizing sleep, are the same kind of things that can lead to that breakdown in communication.